Do you know what separates a failed business exit from a highly profitable one? Do you want to maximize the value of your business? The Business Exit Stories podcast is the solution. Through a collection of stories told by the business intermediaries who facilitate those transactions, you'll receive the key takeaways from successful and, yes, some not so successful business exits. Now is the time to begin to position your business for an exit by implementing key strategies designed to maximize your enterprise value and help you achieve an exceptionally profitable exit.
Today we have a real treat because Dennis Buck, although he is now on the sell side as an M&A advisor, spent a big part of his career working on the buy side as an advisor with an M&A division of a Fortune 500 company, and then in private equity, and finally with an investment company, all on the buy side. This has enabled him to see the world through a different set of glasses than most M&A advisors that we interview on this podcast. Today he shares some of his buy-side deal stories that provides interesting insights on what sellers need to understand by giving you a glimpse into what buyers are thinking. And if you are a buyer, some interesting takeaways that can facilitate your deals. The first transaction that Dennis shares with us is why the FBI, DEA, and state regulatory agencies descended on a business and why this didn't bother the right buyer. Listen for the takeaways on this deal that every seller should know. This is Marvin L. Storm with the Business Exit Stories podcast. Today, we're here with Dennis Buck. Dennis, would you take just a few minutes and share a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're located, so our audience can get a good feel for who they're listening to today?
Thanks, Marvin. My name's Dennis Buck. I am a managing director at Chapman Associates. I am located in Baltimore City, Baltimore, and just happy that I've been able to connect with Marvin and tell a few stories.
Hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about, the buy and sell side? Which side do you fall on?
So I currently fall on the sell side, but I actually came up on the buy side. I started my career more than 15 years ago working for a large publicly owned Fortune 500 company, going around and acquiring privately owned businesses for them. Over the years, I've worked for a couple of publicly owned companies. I have also worked for private equity owned platform companies. But I have now moved to the sell side and work as a business broker for Chapman.
Okay, cool. So let's kind of jump in, and as you bring that orientation of both the buy and sell side to the table, and that you're currently working on the sell side, why don't we talk a little bit about some of those transactions that may have had some both buy and sell side components to it, so our audience can kind of get a feel for, viewing the world a little bit differently as you look at these different transactions. So why don't we start out with a transaction that you were involved in maybe a number of years ago that had some of those components to it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about one of the companies you worked with in the past?
So it was actually one of the first transactions that I was fully involved with and worked on my own. It was originally a long-term care pharmacy that was owned by a husband and wife. They had run the business for a number of years. They were both pharmacists.
When you say a number of years, does that mean 10, 15, what?
They'd run it for probably 30 years together.
Okay. That's a long time to be in the pharmacy business, huh?
For some people, yes. For others, no. There are some people out there who have run them for even longer than that. But the story here, the husband and wife owned the business. The wife had actually gone off and started her own business, separate from pharmacy business. The husband passed away, and
I assume this was somewhat unexpected.
It was not totally unexpected, but my understanding is he had been sick, and but they had a staff to run the business, and she was, still, would still go in, oversee things every once in a while, but this was not something that she was, running day to day.
How many employees did they have? Do you have any feel for that?
I've forgotten the exact number, but it was more than 20. And they had a couple of employees that had been, that were actually running the business and had been there for a number of years.
So this is not necessarily the neighborhood small pharmacy on the corner type of operation. This is a pharmacy with a multi-million-dollar revenue base.
Yes, it is. It is far larger than your corner Rite Aid or CVS. It is more of a warehouse distribution business.
Okay, that gives us a little context there.
And the story starts that after a couple of years, things were seemingly going just fine, and then she realizes that she had a problem with the business.
So just for context here, this is after her husband passed away. She has employees running the business. She's got this other business she's involved in, and she kind of checks in once in a while because she has these long-term employees that have been running the business. Is that kind of how the story is evolving here?
And that's where that's kind of where this starts. And suddenly one day, and it's a pharmacy business, they distribute scheduled narcotics, and she gets a call. One of her employees has been arrested for selling Oxycontin out the back of the pharmacy.
And this was a total surprise. You just got a phone call one day.
Yes. And this was a total surprise. She had security systems, she had cameras, and she had no idea that this was going on. And now she has a major problem. This is a business that she was only tangentially involved in, wasn't involved in the day-to-day. She had another business that she was involved in, and now she has issues with the State Pharmacy Board. She has issues with the DEA, with the FBI, with all sorts of organizations who are now asking questions, and she's now having to spend her full time trying to A, figure out what's going on, B, fix them, and then C, decide, okay, what am I going to do going forward? And so she gets through this and says, all right. She assesses the situation and says, I need to sell this business. I no longer have the desire, time to run this full time as it clearly now has to be run. And, what do I need to, what do I do? She actually reached out to some people, including within the pharmacy world, pharmacists know each other. And she reached out to somebody who she had gone to pharmacy school with, had known her and her husband, and had a long-term care pharmacy that he sold. And he was now working for the same company I was. And so he said, hey, we can help. I'll give you a couple numbers and we'll see what we can do. She also reached out to another gentleman who acts as a business broker and engaged him to try to sell the business. And it was somebody that was recommended to her, who knew the industry, who understood the issues that she was going through, and was able to help walk her through the process of, all right, you're in a special situation. This is what you're going to need to know. And these are the things that you're going to have to understand in order to get this transaction done. So that's kind of where the story gets to me where I get a call saying, "Hey, could you please call her? She needs to sell her pharmacy." And I was working on the buy side, and immediately picked up the phone and said, "All right, hi, we need to meet, and I need to understand everything that's going on," because I had kind of gotten pieces of the story. So
So in a traditional situation like this, when there are problems and you're on the buy side, that really puts up radars of, probably a deeper dive into due diligence than you would normally do, especially when you have the DEA, the FBI, the State Pharmacy Board, all on site, all delving in, and maybe their investigations take a long time to conclude. So how did you on the buy side deal with something like that?
One, it's having the right resources and understanding what you're buying. I had the opportunity to work for a company that did a lot of acquisitions, had a designed program to do acquisitions, and had the resources necessary, whether it be regulatory law firms, whether it be consultants, but people who understood, hey, we're going to go look at something. We need to be able to answer some very fundamental questions, both from not only from a financial standpoint, but from a regulatory standpoint, to make sure that we are doing everything that we need to do in order to get the transaction to not only get it completed, but integrated and with being able to go forward without having any other issues, and being able to set up that structure. And so one of the things we were able to do is we were able to identify people to go in, take an honest look at the business, and say, all right, here's everything they're doing. Here's everything we found. Here's where we think the original problem started. We had actually a firm of consultants that was comprised of former DEA agents. That this is what they did. So we were able to send them in, and they were able to look at everything. And she even showed them the security tapes that she had kept. That they were able to go in and say, all right, here are the issues, here's where things you need to fix, and here's the things we need to do today before we even get closed, to ensure that this doesn't happen in the future, and that once the acquisition happens, that there is no question about the cutoff of responsibility. That once the acquirer buys it, they are already operating at a level that is beyond reproach, because we know the DEA has already come in and looked at this, and there has already been a fine levied for simply allowing it to happen.
So before she got to you, how long was she in the process of righting the ship? Was it a matter of weeks, months, a year? Or
it had been a year at least.
Okay.
And like
so
you said,
she had already done a substantial amount of work to, put in additional, procedures, security.
She had done some.
All right.
But
okay.
the difference between an individual going in and doing it and a corporation who has the resources to hire a lot of people to go in and do it is different.
Okay.
And this also it ultimately led her to the decision to sell, because she started doing some of the work and realized that this was no longer her passion in life to go to do this type of work.
So she sort of had a shift in mindset of what she really wanted to do. And so when her mindset shifted to kind of well, I really need to sell this. I don't want to do this on a day-to-day basis. That probably changed the whole complexion of a future transaction.
It did. And and in this case, people talk about, hanging on too long and, watching the business go down and, taking a passive approach to owning a business and some of the pitfalls. This is really an example of, it wasn't so much the purchase price that was the issue. It was the fact that, the business wasn't growing because she wasn't involved, and it was doing well, but it was what it was.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger
So
loss
what would be
was
the real takeaway on this transaction if you had to boil it down to a sentence or two for our audience here? What would be the big takeaway?
the big takeaway, for me out of this transaction was understanding if you're going to have a passive investment in your business that you own and she owned 100% of the business, that there are pitfalls and issues that can come up that have nothing to do, that have a lot to do with you're not there every day. And unless you have either a management that you fully trust and can keep accountable, or you're willing to go in and spend the time to actually work on the business, that things are going to be missed. And those things could cost you a lot of money in the end of the day.
Right. So it really sounds like, to kind of boil what you just said down there, it really says to our audience here is that sometimes you can hold on too long. And if you do hold on too long, or you don't have that accountability, or at least you think you have it and you really don't, it's going to cost you some money. And I guess in her case, it cost her money on probably the multiple she got for the business. She had this other business, and since she had to divert her full attention to fixing the problem in the pharmacy, that business probably suffered, and it cost her money there, as well as all the dollars on fines that she incurred and loss of income, during that period of time. And it probably cost her $1 million, $2 million. What would you say? I mean, just as an estimate. It
cost her well over $1 million. I know that the fine itself was very hefty because of the type of violation that it was, because it was a scheduled inventory violation. But even more so, I think it cost her time, and it cost her a lot of stress. That something that she had thought, oh, this is running smoothly, I don't have to worry about it. Suddenly she gets hit with a tsunami of she has to worry about everything. And just, even above the loss of income and the cost, I think the cost mentally and the stress that this put her under, she would probably have told you, hey, yeah, that was the worst part of it.
Yeah, I would imagine so. A lot of stress when you have those type of people looking over your shoulder. So I guess, to summarize that takeaway then is, don't hold on to your business too long. It may come back to bite you. When the time is right, you may be able to exit at the top of your game instead of when it's in a downward spiral.
Thanks for listening to the Business Exit Stories podcast. For more information or to reach out to today's guest, visit www.businessexitstories.com for more details. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast from your favorite podcasting platforms. And remember, maximizing business value at the time of exit doesn't happen magically. It takes planning.